Let me ask you something. How much of your life is being run by thoughts you never chose? Right now, in this moment, there are beliefs in your head telling you what you can't do, what you shouldn't try, who you're not allowed to become, and most people never question them. They just obey. But what if the real reason you feel stuck isn't your ability, your past, or your circumstances, but the mental weight you've been carrying every day? Tonight, we're going to strip that weight off. Not slowly, not someday, right now, because the life you want doesn't require more effort. It requires mental freedom. Let's start by clearing something up, because this is where most people lose their power before they ever begin. That negative voice in your head, the doubt, the fear, the self-criticism, it feels personal, doesn't it? It feels like you. It feels like the truth about who you are, but it's not. It was never you. It was learned. And once you understand that, everything changes. You weren't born questioning your worth. You didn't come into this world afraid of failing, afraid of being judged, afraid of not being enough. As a child, you tried, you explored, you fell down, and you got back up without a story attached to it. You didn't say, this fall means I'm a failure. You just stood up and tried again. Somewhere along the way, that changed. Experiences stacked up, words were spoken, reactions were repeated, and slowly, without you realizing it, your mind started to form patterns. The brain is an incredible survival machine. Its job is not to make you happy. Its job is to keep you safe. And safety to the brain means predictability. So when something hurt emotionally or mentally, the brain took notes. It said, remember this, don't let this happen again. That's how negative thinking is born. Not out of weakness, but out of protection. Maybe you failed once and it was painful. So your mind learned, don't try too hard next time. Maybe you spoke up and were judged. So your mind learned, stay quiet, stay small. Maybe someone important made you feel like you weren't enough. So your mind learned, if I expect less, I won't be disappointed. None of that means those thoughts are true. It means they were practiced. And here's the part that changes everything. Anything that is learned can be unlearned. Your negative thinking is not a personality trait. It's not your destiny. It's not your identity. It's a habit. And habits don't have power once you see them for what they are. The problem is most people never question the voice in their head. They assume if they think it, it must be real. But the mind doesn't speak truth. It speaks familiarity. Think about how often you've replayed the same thought. I'm not ready. I always mess things up. This never works for me. The reason those thoughts feel convincing isn't because they're accurate. It's because they're familiar. Repetition creates belief, not evidence. Your mind is like a muscle. Whatever you train it on, it grows stronger. If you've trained it on worry, it becomes an expert at fear. If you've trained it on criticism, it becomes sharp at tearing you down. But that doesn't mean it's right. It means it's rehearsed. And here's the danger. When you identify with a thought long enough, it becomes your identity. You stop saying, I'm having a negative thought, and you start saying, this is who I am. You don't just feel afraid, you're afraid. You don't just experience doubt, you're doubtful. That's when people stop trying to change because they think they're fighting themselves. But you're not fighting yourself. You're challenging a program. Every belief you have was installed by environment, by repetition, by emotion. Some beliefs lifted you, others limited you. But none of them are permanent unless you keep reinforcing them. The moment you separate who you are from what you've learned, you take your power back. Notice the language shift. Instead of I am negative, it becomes I've been practicing negative thinking. That subtle change opens the door to transformation because you don't judge a habit, you change it. And let's be honest for a moment. Beating yourself up for negative thinking only strengthens it. You don't escape a mental prison by attacking the prisoner. You escape by realizing the door was never locked in the first place. The real breakthrough happens when you stop asking, what's wrong with me, and start asking, where did I learn this? That question creates compassion instead of resistance. It moves you from shame into understanding, and understanding dissolves control. Your brain responds to emotion, not logic. So if you attach guilt and frustration to your thoughts, your brain thinks, this must be important. Let's hold on to it. But when you observe your thoughts without identifying with them, their grip weakens. You see them as patterns, not commands. And once you see a pattern, you can interrupt it. You don't need to fix your entire life today. You don't need to silence every negative thought. All you need is awareness. Awareness breaks unconscious habits. The moment you catch yourself and say, this is a learned response, not a truth, you create space. And in that space, choice appears. Choice is where freedom lives. You are not your past experiences. You are not the words spoken to you in moments of pain. You are not the conclusions you made when you didn't know better. You are the one who learned them, and that means you are the one who can release them. And here's the truth most people never hear. You don't become more powerful by adding something new. You become powerful by letting go of what never belonged to you in the first place. So remember this as we move forward. Every negative thought you challenge loosens its grip, and the moment you stop believing everything you think, you step back into who you really are. Now that you understand those negative thoughts were learned, there's another truth that will either limit you or liberate you, depending on how you use it. Your mind doesn't argue with what you tell it. It doesn't debate truth. It doesn't stop to ask whether something is helpful or harmful. It simply listens, records, and responds. Whatever you repeat, especially with emotion, becomes an instruction. Think about that for a moment. The brain is a meaning-making machine. Its job is to follow patterns and create certainty. When a thought is repeated often enough, the brain stops questioning it and starts building your identity around it. That's why the most dangerous conversations you ever have aren't the ones you have with other people. They're the ones you have with yourself. Most people talk to themselves in ways they would never allow anyone else to speak to them. You're stupid. You're too late. You always screw this up. And because that voice is internal, it feels authoritative. It feels like the truth. But your mind doesn't believe those statements because they're accurate. It believes them because they're repeated. Repetition is the real hypnotist. You're nervous. System is always listening. Every word you say internally sends a signal. Say something once, it's a suggestion. Say it 100 times, it becomes a belief. Say it with emotion, and it becomes your reality. The body reacts before the mind ever analyzes. That's why you can feel anxious even when nothing is wrong, or defeated before you've even begun. Your internal language has already given the command. And here's what most people don't realize. The mind doesn't understand jokes, sarcasm, or exaggeration. When you say, I'm terrible at this, even casually, your brain doesn't hear humor. It hears a directive. It begins aligning your focus, your posture, your breathing, and your expectations to match that identity. You didn't fail because you weren't capable. You failed because you were already rehearsing failure internally. What you say to yourself becomes the lens through which you interpret everything. Two people can experience the same setback. One says, this is proof I'm not good enough. The other says, this is feedback. Same event, completely different future. The difference isn't talent, it's internal dialogue. The words you repeat determine what you notice, what you attempt, and what you avoid. Your brain is always asking, what should I look for? And your self-talk answers that question. If you keep telling yourself life is hard, your brain will search for evidence. If you keep saying people can't be trusted, your brain will filter for betrayal. Whatever you repeat becomes your evidence-gathering mission. This is why people feel stuck even when opportunity is right in front of them. Their internal language has already decided the outcome. And the mind loves efficiency. Once a belief is established, it runs automatically. You don't wake up and consciously decide to doubt yourself. The pattern fires on its own. But just because something is automatic D doesn't mean it's permanent. It means it's been practiced. Here's the key. You cannot stop your mind from talking, but you can choose what you repeat. You don't need to silence the voice. You need to train it. The same way repetition created limitation, repetition can create confidence. The same mechanism that wired fear can wire strength. The mind doesn't resist positive or negative. It responds to consistency. At first, new language will feel fake. That's normal. Familiar feels true. New feels uncomfortable. But discomfort is the sign of rewiring. When you interrupt an old pattern and choose a new phrase, you're not lying to yourself. You're upgrading the instruction. Instead of, I can't handle this, it becomes, I'll figure this out. Instead of this always goes wrong, it becomes, this is a moment, not a life sentence. These aren't affirmations you say once and forget. They're commands you practice until they become automatic. And don't underestimate the power of tone. Emotion is the glue. When you speak to yourself with certainty, your nervous system follows. When you speak with doubt, it contracts. Your words shape your physiology, and your physiology shapes your decisions. This is why people with less skill often outperform those with more talent. Their internal language creates momentum instead of resistance. They don't wait to feel confident. They speak in a way that creates confidence. Listen carefully. Your mind will always believe the strongest voice in your head. Make sure it's yours, not your past. You don't need to be perfect. You need to be intentional. Catch the patterns, interrupt the language, replace repetition with direction. Over time, what once felt forced becomes familiar, and what becomes familiar becomes your new identity. You're not controlled by your thoughts, you're trained by them. And the moment you change what you repeat, you can. What you believe, what you feel, and ultimately what you become. Because the voice you listen to most will decide the life you live. Here's where most people misunderstand how change really works. They think negative thinking starts in the mind, so they try to fight it with more thinking. They analyze it, argue with it, try to reason it away, and the harder they try, the stronger it feels. That's because the source of negative thinking isn't logic, it's state. It's emotion. It's the condition of your nervous system in the moment. Your thoughts are not the root, they are the result. Every thought you have is colored by the emotional state you're in. When you're tired, stressed, overwhelmed, or afraid, your mind automatically searches for problems. It scans for danger. It replays memories that match the feeling. That's not weakness, that's biology. Your nervous system was designed to protect you, not inspire you. When you're in a survival state, creativity shuts down, perspective narrows. The mind doesn't ask what's possible, it asks what could go wrong. That's why the same person can feel confident, capable one day and completely stuck the next. Nothing about their ability changed. Their emotional state did. This is why you can't think your way out of a bad state. If your body is tense, your breathing is shallow, your shoulders are tight, and your energy is low, your thoughts will follow that pattern. The body leads, the mind obeys, always. Negative thinking survives because it's fed by emotion. Fear feeds it, stress feeds it, uncertainty feeds it, and once the body is locked into that pattern, the mind keeps justifying it with thoughts that feel real and convincing. You don't feel afraid because of your thoughts. You think fearful thoughts because you're already afraid. This is the mental prison most people live in. They try to solve an emotional problem with intellectual effort. But emotion doesn't respond to logic. It responds to movement, breath, focus, and meaning. Think about the last time you felt truly confident. Not because something external changed, but because something shifted inside you. Your posture was different. Your breathing was deeper. Your focus was clear. In that state, problems felt smaller. Options felt available. That didn't happen because you suddenly became smarter. It happened because your state changed. Your emotional state is the foundation of every decision you make. That's why people make promises when they feel strong and break them when they feel weak. Same values, same goals, different state. The version of you that makes excuses isn't lazy, it's overwhelmed. The version of you that quits isn't incapable, it's exhausted emotionally. If you want to break negative thinking, you don't start by attacking thoughts. You start by changing state. Change your physiology and your psychology will follow. This is why movement matters. When you move your body, you move your energy. When energy shifts, focus shifts. When focus shifts, thoughts change. You don't need an hour. Sometimes you need 60 seconds of intentional movement, a deep breath, a shift in posture. That's enough to interrupt the pattern. Breathing alone can change your entire mental landscape. Shallow breathing tells your nervous system there's danger. Deep, controlled breathing tells it you're safe. Safety creates clarity. Clarity creates choice. And then there's focus. Whatever you focus on, you feel. Whatever you feel, you reinforce. If you constantly focus on what you're losing, what you lack, what could fail, your emotional state collapses. But when you shift focus even slightly to what you can control, what you're learning, what you're grateful for, the emotional tone changes. This isn't positive thinking. This is emotional leadership. You are not here to eliminate negative emotions. They're part of being human. You're here to stop letting them drive. Emotion is like weather. It changes. But most people build their identity around a storm and forget the sky is still there. When you learn to recognize your state, you stop believing every thought that comes with it. You realize this is not the truth of my life. This is the chemistry of this moment. That awareness alone loosens the grip. And here's the most important part. You don't wait for your state to change to take action. You change your state to take action. Action creates momentum. Momentum creates confidence. Confidence creates new beliefs. This is how emotional prisons are broken, not by force, by leadership. You lead your body, you lead your focus, you lead your meaning. And when you do, negative thinking loses its fuel. It can't survive without emotional reinforcement. You don't need to be fearless. You need to be in motion. The moment you shift your state, you shift your thoughts. And the moment you realize you control your state, you reclaim your freedom. At some point, there comes a moment where insight alone is not enough. You can understand where negative thinking came from. You can recognize the patterns. You can even feel the emotional shifts. But if you don't make a decision, nothing truly changes, because letting go is not something that happens to you over time. Letting go is something you choose in a moment. Most people think letting go is a process that takes years. They believe they need more healing, more clarity, more time. And without realizing it, that belief becomes the excuse that keeps them stuck. They keep waiting to feel ready. They keep waiting for the pain to disappear. But readiness doesn't come first. Decision does. Every breakthrough in your life happened because at some point you drew a line and said enough. You didn't negotiate with the old pattern. You didn't ask permission from fear. You decided that the cost of staying the same was greater than the discomfort of change. Negative thinking survives because it's tolerated, not because it's strong, but because it's familiar. The mind will cling to what it knows, even if it hurts, because uncertainty feels more dangerous than pain. So people stay in mental patterns they hate simply because those patterns feel predictable. But the truth is, you don't let go when you feel like it. You let go when you decide you've had enough. Think about how many thoughts you've carried that no longer serve you. Old judgments, old regrets, old stories about who you are and what you're capable of. You didn't consciously choose most of them. They just stayed. And over time, they became heavy. They drained your energy. They shaped your expectations. But here's the question that changes everything. What are those thoughts costing you now? Every negative thought has a price. It costs you focus. It costs you confidence. It costs you presence. And most of all, it costs you time, the most valuable thing you have. When you truly see the cost, decision becomes easy. You stop asking, why am I like this? And you start saying, this ends here. That's not denial. That's leadership. Letting go doesn't mean the thought disappears forever. It means it no longer has authority. It means when it shows up, you don't follow it. You don't feed it. You don't argue with it. You acknowledge it and you move on. Power is not in control. Power is in choice. Most people believe they need to understand a thought completely before releasing it. That's another trap. You don't need to analyze every story to let it go. You don't need to relive the pain. You need to decide that it no longer deserves your energy. The mind It'll always offer reasons to hold on. It will say, what if you need this? What if this keeps you safe? What if you let go and fail? But those are just echoes of an old survival strategy. They are not instructions for your future. Decision collapses time. The moment you decide, your brain begins to reorganize around that choice. Your focus shifts. Your behavior shifts. Your identity begins to shift. That's why people can change in an instant when the decision is strong enough. Weak decisions create weak results. Strong decisions change lives. And here's where most people misunderstand commitment. They think commitment means never having the thought again. That's impossible. Commitment means never believing it again, never letting it decide your actions, never letting it define your worth. You don't argue with a thought you've outgrown, you dismiss it. Think about who you were 5 years ago. There are things that once mattered deeply that don't even register now, not because they disappeared on their own, but because you became someone who no longer identified with them. Letting go is not about loss, it's about evolution. Every time you tolerate a thought that weakens you, you teach your mind that it's acceptable. Every time you interrupt it and choose differently, you teach your mind who's in charge. This is where self-respect is built, not in moments of comfort, but in moments of decision. And understand this, the longer you delay a decision, the more energy you give to the old pattern. Indecision is still a decision. It's a decision to stay the same. You don't need to wait for confidence to let go. Confidence is the reward of letting go. So make the decision, not tomorrow, not when it feels easier. Now, decide that the thoughts that drain you no longer get to live rent-free in your mind. Decide that your future deserves more space than your past. The moment you stop tolerating what weakens you. You step into the strength that's been waiting for you all along. Once you make the decision to let go, there's one more truth you must understand if you want real, lasting change. The mind does not operate on emptiness. It cannot. If you remove an old pattern and don't replace it with something stronger, the old story will come back. Not because you failed, but because the brain is wired to fill space. You cannot delete a belief. You can only overwrite it. Most people think letting go is enough. They stop feeding a negative thought and assume it will disappear. But the mind hates a vacuum. When there's uncertainty, it will reach for what's familiar, and familiar is usually the past. That's why people relapse into old thinking even after breakthroughs. They didn't replace the identity, they only paused it. Your brain is constantly asking one question, who am I now? If you don't answer that question consciously, your past will answer it for you. Old labels, old limitations, old expectations, not because they're true, but because they're available. This is where identity becomes everything. You will always act in alignment with who you believe you are, not who you want to be, not who you hope to become, who you believe you are right now. So if you still see yourself as the person who doubts, hesitates, and holds back, your behavior will eventually return to match that identity, even if you've had moments of confidence. Lasting change requires a new story, a stronger one, a story with emotion, meaning, and repetition. Think about the stories you've been telling yourself for years. I'm the one who struggles. I'm not consistent. This is just how I am. Those stories were reinforced through repetition and emotion. They didn't become powerful overnight. They became powerful because they were rehearsed. So if you want a new identity, you must rehearse it with the same intensity. This doesn't mean pretending everything is perfect. It means choosing a story that moves you forward instead of holding you hostage. It means shifting from this is who I've been to this is who I'm becoming. And here's the key. The new story must be emotionally compelling. The brain doesn't change for logic, it changes for meaning. You must attach emotion to the identity you're stepping into. Emotion is what locks it in. Ask yourself, who are you when you're at your best? Not in fantasy, in real moments when you show up, when you push through, when you lead yourself, that version of you already exists. Your job is to feed that identity until it becomes dominant. Every day, your actions vote for who you believe you are. Small actions done consistently tell your brain, this is me now. And the brain listens. It always listens. You don't wait for the new story to feel natural. Natural is trained. You repeat it until it becomes familiar. And familiar becomes normal. And normal becomes identity. The old story will try to return. It always does, especially when you're tired, stressed, or uncertain. That doesn't mean the new story isn't working. It means the old one is losing ground. This is the moment where most people give up. They say, see, I knew it. But what's really happening is the mind testing leadership. When the old voice shows up, you don't fight it. You don't analyze it. You redirect. You choose the new story again and again and again. This is not willpower. This is conditioning. And understand this, the story you tell yourself determines what you notice, what you attempt, and what you persist through. Change the story and you change the filter through which you experience life. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your identity. So define it, speak it, act from it, let it guide your decisions, especially when it's uncomfortable, because identity is forged in moments of resistance, not ease. You are not here to become someone new. You are here to remember who you are without the old limitations attached. And when your identity shifts, behavior follows effortlessly. Confidence stops being something you chase and becomes something you express. Discipline stops feeling like punishment and becomes alignment. Action stops feeling forced and becomes natural. The future version of you isn't waiting for more time. It's waiting for you to choose a new story and live it. Starting now, when you begin to release the weight of negative thinking, something remarkable happens that most people never experience long enough to trust. Space opens up, mental space, emotional space. And in that space, a different version of you starts to emerge. Not because you added something new, but because you finally removed what was blocking it. Negative thinking is heavy. It consumes energy quietly. It clutters your focus with noise that never produces results. You wake up tired, not because you didn't sleep, but because your mind has been running all night, replaying, worrying, predicting, judging. And over time, that mental clutter becomes so normal that people forget what clarity feels like. But the moment you start emptying it out even a little, you feel lighter, you breathe deeper, you move differently, your posture shifts. And suddenly the future doesn't feel like something to fear. It feels like something you can step into. Here's the truth. Your best self doesn't need to be built. It needs room. Most people think they lack confidence, discipline, or motivation. They do. And they lack space. Their mind is so crowded with old stories, past mistakes, imagined futures, and constant self-judgment that there's no room for intuition, creativity, or courage to come through. When mental space opens, clarity rushes in naturally. You don't have to force it. Decisions that once felt overwhelming become obvious. Problems that once felt permanent become temporary. You start responding instead of reacting. That's not because life got easier. It's because your mind got clearer. Your future self has always been there, stronger, calmer, more decisive, more present. But that version of you can't speak when the mind is full of noise. It whispers and negativity shouts. When you let go of the unnecessary weight, you finally hear that voice. This is why simplicity is power. The less mental clutter you carry, the more energy you have for what actually matters. Focus sharpens. Actions become intentional. You stop chasing everything and start committing to what aligns. And here's something most people don't realize. Confidence is not loud. Confidence is calm. It's the absence of internal conflict. It's what shows up when you're no longer fighting yourself. When negative thinking loses its grip, you stop questioning every move. You trust yourself, not because you're certain of the outcome, but because you're certain of who you are. That trust is magnetic. People feel it. Opportunities respond to it. Life flows differently when you're not carrying the weight of doubt. This is what freedom actually feels like. Not excitement all the time, not constant positivity. Freedom feels like peace. It feels like groundedness. It feels like knowing that whatever comes, you can handle it. And action changes too. You no longer move from fear or urgency. You move from clarity. You don't rush. You don't freeze. You choose. And choice is the highest form of power. Whap! Your mind is lighter. Your vision gets wider. You start thinking long-term. You see beyond immediate discomfort. You stop sabotaging what matters for short-term relief. That's maturity. That's leadership. This is why the future you've been waiting for hasn't arrived yet. Not because you weren't capable, but because your mind was full of things that didn't belong to the person you're becoming. Letting go is not loss. It's preparation. Every belief you release creates room for something better. Every thought you no longer entertain returns energy to your body. Every story you drop clears the path forward. You don't feel empty, you feel open. And openness is where growth lives. There will be moments when the old noise tries to return. That's normal, but now you recognize it for what it is. Static, not signal. You don't need to react, you simply clear it again. This becomes a practice, not a struggle. Over time, this becomes your default state. Calm, focused, present, and from that place, life stops feeling like something you're surviving and starts feeling like something you're shaping. You were never meant to carry every thought that passed through your mind. You were meant to choose. And as you empty out what no longer serves you, you create the space your future has been waiting for, because the strongest version of you doesn't need more force. It needs more room.